All right, so we have more craziness coming out of the States, but I'm sure this will be similar in Canada, in that this is from Tom Elliott quoting Van Gupta, saying just because you get vaccinated after the second dose does not mean you should be traveling or that you're liberated from masks. Um, and Ted Cruz responds by saying, "This is bizarre, lunatic, totalitarian cult. It's not about vaccines or protecting people's lives. It is instead profoundly anti-science and is focused on absolute government control of every aspect of our lives." And again, that's a very good way of putting it. That's a very good way of putting it. This is something I've been saying for months now, like honestly, almost since like May. And I think this is something I brought up a lot before, but this is the thing that the average person gets the most wrong. In that, in talking to people, I find very few people actually support the lockdowns. But I do find that a lot of people reluctantly support the lockdowns and the mask mandates and all of this kind of stuff under the guise that it's temporary, right? It's only temporary. Just go along with it and it'll be good before you know it, right? But it really isn't. It really isn't, right? Like, Edmonton has mask mandates for the next year. Same goes for Calgary now. This stuff isn't going to be temporary. They're going to keep pushing until enough people finally stand up for it, right? Like, we were told for the longest time that oh, once we get a vaccine, we'll be good to go, right? Once we get a vaccine, then we can reopen. But now that we have a vaccine, I mean, they're just starting to dose it out right now, but we have many of these experts saying, oh no, things aren't going to be normal yet. So again, the goal here isn't about safety. It's not about safety or saving lives or any of this kind of stuff. This is entirely about pushing like I say, for lack of a better word, a cult, right? The goal here is to push socialism. The goal is to grow government as much as possible, right? Like until people wake up to that fact, things aren't going to get any better. And this, like I say, in talking to people, I talk to very few people who actually full on support the lockdowns, right? And the mask mandate. Same goes for that. But again, like I say, most people fall into the camp of people who just go along under the guise that it's going to be temporary, and that's really not the case. Like that's really not the case. And again, they're just straight up telling you that they're straight up telling you that it's not going to be temporary. So I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would want to think any differently, right? So the next thing I wanted to bring up is again, I wanted to touch on this again because I think this is a story that should have been a lot bigger than it actually. I mean, it was somewhat viral, but it should be. This should have been the biggest story in Canada over the last week or so. I mean, this should have been as big as the rebel breaking the Chinese troops in Canada thing. Um, but anyway, like I say, this is from Jay Tizik here, and he says, politicians and media listen to the experts, and the experts, I just say whatever they write down for me. Again, this is one of the stupidest arguments I hear. All not just about this stuff. This is something you hear about climate change and a lot of other things too. And that, you know, the first thing that I would bring up is that when anyone makes that argument, when everyone says, "Oh, you're not a doctor, who cares what you think," or "You don't get an opinion," or that kind of argument, it's almost always an admission of not actually having an argument, right? That's almost always an admission of just, I have nothing, I'm going to try to use this argument from authority. And here's the other thing, too, when it comes to this kind of stuff, is that there is many experts that don't agree with the lockdowns, the mask mandates, all of this kind of stuff. Not even the WHO doesn't even agree with the lockdowns anymore, right? So this is something that I really can't stand, is that there's this idea amongst the mainstream that, oh, the vast majority of experts agree with the lockdowns, and when that's not the case, right? That's not the case. And here's the other thing too. I think that here, like I said, this is another problem with these kind of people. If their pay was dependent upon their recommendations working, far more of these people wouldn't support the lockdowns, because if you told if you told Hinshaw, if you told Yaffe and Tam and all these people, say, yeah, we're okay if you recommend lockdowns, but if we lock down and the cases don't go down, your pay's going to be cut or you're fired, something along those lines. That's how society should be working right now, because like I say, because by locking down, someone who just recently lost their job or lost their job at any point, their businesses was destroyed. Their income's gone, right? They can't get anything. And I mean, if they can, it's peanuts, right? Like how many people, are living can live off the CERB? I mean, some people can, but if you have a family and a mortgage, and you're not going to be able to live off $2,000 a month, especially in a bigger city. So that's the thing to bring up too. Like, why do these people's jobs not depend upon making good recommendations, right? Like, why does it not happen? And I think the answer is very simple in that these people will face no repercussions if the amount of suicide, the amount of depression, the amount of jobs that are lost far outshadows the amount of people that otherwise die because of the virus. They will face no negative repercussions from that. They will face no negative repercussions. But if people are dying from the virus, they're going to receive negative repercussions. Not necessarily that they're going to lose their job, but I mean, if they're out in public, there's going to be the Karens of the world. They're going to be yelling at them. The CBC and all these people will be all over them. So again, this is the problem with how we run society, is that the incentives of these people, it's entirely backwards. It's entirely backwards in that they only face negative repercussions one way, right? They only face negative repercussions one way. And that is why we've gone so far off the deep end on this whole situation, is that no politician is facing any negative repercussions because of the amount of mass unemployment, the increase in suicide, the increase in depression, all of this kind of stuff. No politician, the amount of new debt, right? None of these politicians that have signed on to this, half a trillion in new debt this year, none of them are ever going to have to face the music on that. They'll be out of office, right? They'll be out of office. So again, this is like I say, the reason that society is so completely backwards, that people who make bad decisions never have to face the repercussions of those bad decisions. And that is why the way we currently do things, it's never going to work out in the end, because until that changes, it's never going to change. So anyway, like I say, this is something that should have been talked about a lot more, because anybody who, whenever you're debating someone and they bring up, oh, listen to the experts, you're not a doctor, who cares? Again, anybody saying that, they have no credibility. They have no credibility, because that's, like I say, that's almost always a confession of not having an argument. And number two, it's almost always a confession of, like I say, just blindly listen to me. Who cares what you have to say? Just blindly listen to me. And I mean, this is another thing too, that a lot of these doctors, they're not experts in these fields. And like I say, this is another thing too, that why is it just doctors that we're listening to? What background do doctors have in the if you shut down society, the amount of increase in anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts, right? What formal training? I mean, they maybe have a little bit of that, but why aren't we talking to psychologists about that? If you lay off, 10, 20, 30% of the population, why aren't we talking to economists about what the negative ramifications for that could be, right? Why aren't we doing that? We're not. And this is another reason why the whole what's just listen to the doctors makes no sense, because the doctors have no idea what's going to happen if we lay off, if 20 or 30% of the population isn't working. They have no idea what's going to happen down the road for that. They again, a lot of these people don't even know a whole lot about the medical field, right? Like, where are these doctors talking about the flaws of the PCR test? Like, where are they? They're not, a lot of them aren't talking about it, right? So again, and then I think another thing too is that, again, a lot of these people are directly paid by the government too, in that maybe they are quote unquote experts. I mean, they are, at least in whatever their field is. The problem being is that when your paycheck is dependent upon the government paying it, you're not going to make, at the very least, you have a very large incentive to not make a recommendation that goes against whatever edict the government wants promulgated, right? You're just not going to do it. Or at the very least, you're going to be a lot less likely to do it, right? So anyway, the next thing I wanted to bring up here is from Candice Malcolm. Now, she has a story titled Quebec bans Christmas gatherings for majority of residents. Now, again, this is something that Alberta technically has done. I mean, I think there's a lot of areas that have done this. In fact, I think pretty much everywhere has, at least of the major provinces. I mean, GTA, I think for sure. Manitoba, they have a complete, authoritarian lockdown going on there. I think Saskatchewan did as well. I'm not 100% sure about BC. I know BC's been one of the areas, at least compared to like the GTA, that is actually they haven't had mask mandates for as long. They've actually been a little bit looser, but again, not that they're a area that you want to look at to emulate. But um, this whole idea of shutting down Christmas, how many people are actually going to follow this? Like I have family members that they're people. Some of them are they're not like full on. We need to lock down and infinitum, but they're people that are clearly somewhat paranoid about this whole situation, but yet they still want to get together for Christmas, right? Like this is the thing I bring up too from people is that actions speak louder than words. Like actions speak louder than words. You have a lot of people that, they're paranoid about the lockdown or paranoid about the virus, but yet they still are getting together with friends, or at the very least they want to, right? So this is something that I think should be talked about more. That I see these polls that show that the majority of people support lockdowns, but number one, I don't think that's the case, and number two, I think a lot of people say that they support lockdowns because the mainstream media has spewed endless amounts of propaganda at them saying that, oh, if you don't support lockdowns, you want to kill grandma kind of thing. When in reality, they're just saying that, but in the back of their mind, they're still getting together with friends. They still, you know, still want to get their nails done or their hair done or whatever people like doing, right? So again, I think that's something that's better to ask people. It's like rather than um, do you support the lockdowns, ask them, are you prepared to stay home and literally not leave your house aside from maybe to get groceries once every week or two? I think that's a better way of asking people. Like again, like a lot of these people that they like to cite Australia, but what they don't tell you about Australia is um, you need the government's permission to leave your house, right? Literally need the government's permission to leave your house, right? Like Australia is arresting people for walking their dogs alone, right? Alone. They're arresting people for making Facebook posts questioning the lockdown measures. Like these are the same people that are though they're all worried about my fascism, but yet real fascism comes along and they could care less. It's almost like you don't actually care, right? So anyway, I think that this is going to be a miserable failure. But here's the thing: when it comes to Christmas, I think this is just a perfect setup from the government's point of view and from the lockdown zealots' point of view. So here's the thing. Um, if the cases haven't came down by Christmas time, it's going to be proof that the lockdowns had no effect because they implemented them on, I think it was the 12th, or was it I think it was the 12th that they first started. Um, so again, that's I guess that's not technically fully 2 weeks, but actually sorry, they announced them sooner than that. I don't think most places locked down officially till last Sunday. But again, it is going to be 2 weeks from the day they announce the new restrictions to the day um, that they actually implemented them, right? So if the cases haven't came down by Christmas, then it's going to be proof that the lockdowns did no effect. But I think what's going to end up happening is it's not going to have an effect, but the lockdown zealots are going to use the people got together at Christmas so it didn't work as an excuse. I think that's what they're going to use as an excuse. And the last thing I wanted to bring up here is from the Vancouver Sun, and it's titled "Canucks to Cut Ties with Anthem Singer Mark Donnelly over plan to sing at anti-mask rally." And again, freedom is no longer a thing in Canada. I really don't know how anyone still argues with a straight face that we have, freedom, that the charter still means anything, like any of that kind of stuff. Like it means nothing. It means literally nothing. And, you know, that's where we're at. Like that's where we're at. That, you have to bend the knee or else. And this is the thing too, that we're at a point to where again this is something that people say too they'll say, oh, this whole virus situation, it's not a political thing, right? It's not a political thing. But on the flip side, they'll say, oh, if you want to, if at the very least, if you work a mainstream job like this, if you want to participate in any lockdown rallies or anti-mask rallies, then you're going to lose your job, right? You're going to lose your job. So again, is it political or is it not political? Because if it's not political, then people shouldn't be losing their jobs over it, right? So it clearly is political, and they are even admitting that. So yeah, this is a very scary precedent, and again, I'm not sure why more people aren't up in arms about this. Um, the reality is that a lot of people they just don't care that much. I think a lot of people are so fed up that they don't even know what to do anymore. And that's just going to make the problem worse in the long run. It's just going to make the problem worse in the long run. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. If you like the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on these other platforms if you haven't already. Um, Make sure if you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I appreciate whatever support I can get. So again, hit that like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more, and have a good day.